In the middle of a lavish charity luncheon, in front of hundreds of guests, I publicly humiliated my wife. I took my mistress by the hand and pushed the woman I had sworn to protect into an abyss of shame. I thought it was the sweetest victory, the peak of a revenge plot that had been simmering for generations. But I was wrong. That single act wasn't just the beginning of my downfall. It was the moment a queen was born from the ashes I had created with my own hands. If you want to know how cruel betrayal can be, and how extraordinary a woman's strength can become, go ahead and hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and stick with me through this story. Because the lesson at the end of this dark road will change the way you think about forgiveness and the true price of hatred. These 4 cold, grey concrete walls are my world now. There are no expensive Italian suits, no gleaming Swiss watches. Only a coarse orange jumpsuit, and a silence so profound it's deafening. In that silence, the past isn't a memory. It's a living ghost that haunts me, whispering of sins that can never be washed away. I close my eyes, but the image of Ava appears, crystal clear. Not the Ava of today, the powerful woman I occasionally see in the snippets of news that filter in here. It's the Ava from before, with eyes so clear they held an entire sky of trust, a pure soul whose light I extinguished with my own hands. It didn't begin with me. It began with an inheritance, a poisonous inheritance, passed down from my father, Richard Vance. My father was a titan, a giant in the world of finance, with a smile that could light up a room and a mind that could destroy an empire. To the world, he was a legend. To me, he was a god, and his words were scripture. But inside that god lived a malignant tumor of hatred, a bitterness that gnawed at him every day. That hatred had a name: Alexander Sterling. Alexander Sterling had been my father's partner, his best friend. Together, they had built Sterling and Vance from nothing. But according to my father, when the company was at its peak, Alexander betrayed him. A brutal backstabbing that forced my father out of the company he'd poured his blood and sweat into. My father lost everything: his reputation, his fortune, his health. He died of a heart attack when I was just 20, but I knew it was the betrayal that killed him. On his deathbed, his final words to me weren't of love, but a command. Never let the Sterlings know peace. Take back what is ours, Julian, by any means necessary. That command became the gospel of my life. I spent the next 10 years rebuilding, becoming strong enough, smart enough to fulfill my promise. I didn't just want to beat Alexander. I wanted to annihilate him, to make him feel the same loss my father had endured. I studied him, tracked his every move, searching for a crack in his armor, a vulnerability. And then I found it. Not in a financial report or a business deal, but in a dusty, forgotten file from an old orphanage. Ava. Alexander's only grandchild, the daughter of his own deceased child from a tragic accident years ago. The baby was thought to have died with her mother, but she had survived, placed in the foster care system under a different name. Alexander had searched for her for years to no avail, and now I had found her. She was working in a small design studio, living a modest life, completely unaware of her prestigious lineage. The moment I saw her photograph in that file, a perfectly cruel plan crystallized in my mind. She wasn't a woman. She was a weapon. She was the key to unlocking the gates of the Sterling Empire, the perfect pawn for my endgame. The plan was simple. I would make her fall in love with me. I would marry her. I would use her as a shield to embezzle Alexander's company, and when it was all over, I would frame her for everything. The very granddaughter Alexander had just found. I wouldn't just take his money. I would take his family, all over again. I would make him pay for his sins against my father with the pain of his own blood. To complete the plan, I needed an accomplice. Sophia, the daughter of the loyal lawyer who had handled my father's affairs. Her father owed mine a debt of loyalty, and she was eager to help me collect. Together we mapped out every move. The game was set, and Ava, the innocent lamb, was about to walk into the lion's den. Approaching Ava was shockingly easy. She was an open book, yearning for the simple things life had denied her: stability, validation, and above all, love. I walked into her design studio under the guise of a potential client, a real estate developer looking for a talented designer for a new luxury project. I remember that first meeting perfectly. She wore a simple dress, her hair in a messy bun, a few specks of paint on her cheek. But when she spoke about her work, her eyes lit up with a passion that was captivating. She had real talent, a unique vision for space and color. I pretended to listen, nodding appreciatively, while my mind was clinically analyzing her every gesture, her every word, looking for the cracks in her soul to slip through. "You're actually listening," she said after our first meeting, a surprised smile on her face. "Most clients just care about the budget." "Your talent deserves to be listened to," I replied, with just the right amount of feigned sincerity. My performance had begun. Every date was an elaborate production. I took her to the fanciest restaurants, only to tell her I preferred simple street food. I gave her expensive gifts, only to insist that the most meaningful gift was our time together. I told her a carefully edited version of my life story. A man who lost his father young, who had to build his career from scratch, who felt alone despite his success. I became the man she was searching for. Strong on the outside, but vulnerable at heart. Someone who could protect her, but also needed her to heal him. Her innocence was both my greatest weapon and, at times, something I privately scorned. She believed every word, drank in the fairy tale I was weaving. She told me about her years in the orphanage, her desperate longing for a family, for a place to belong. I listened with a mask of empathy, while internally, I was calculating how best to exploit those wounds. I introduced Sophia to Ava as my childhood best friend, the sister I never had. Ava, with her open heart, welcomed Sophia without a hint of suspicion. They quickly became close. Sophia played the role of confidant, always encouraging Ava to trust me more, to open up to me completely. "Julian has been through so much," Sophia would tell Ava over coffee. "You're the best thing that's ever happened to him. Never doubt his love for you." Meanwhile, behind Ava's back, Sophia and I would sit in my office, laughing at her gullibility as we went over the next steps of the plan. "She's completely hooked," Sophia said, sipping a glass of wine. "Sometimes I almost feel guilty." "Kill that feeling," I'd say coldly. "This is war. There's no room for pity. Remember what our fathers went through." My father's feud became my armor, shielding me from any pangs of conscience. Every time I looked into Ava's eyes and said, "I love you," I saw the face of Alexander Sterling. Every embrace, every kiss was an act of war, another step closer to my enemy's ruin. I was building a castle of love on a foundation of lies, and I knew that when the time was right, I would be the one to tear it down, burying Ava in the rubble. She was, I told myself, acceptable collateral damage in a much larger war, a pawn that had to be sacrificed to checkmate the king. And I, Julian Vance, would be the last one standing. Our wedding was the social event of the season, splashed across the pages of glossy magazines. Everything was perfect. The white peonies, the string quartet, and a radiant bride in a breathtaking gown. Ava cried as we exchanged our vows, tears of pure joy, of a dream come true. I smiled too, a smile practiced 100 times in the mirror. When I kissed her, the crowd erupted in applause. They saw a perfect couple, I saw a transaction completed. Phase 1 of the plan was a resounding success. Our married life began. I turned our home into a gilded cage. Every material need Ava had was met before she even realized she had it. Luxury cars, designer clothes, extravagant vacations. I gave her everything except the truth. In return, I slowly stripped away her independence. "Honey, you have me to take care of everything now," I'd say when she spoke excitedly about a new design project she wanted to take on. "Why work so hard? Just enjoy your life." Gradually, she let her studio go. "Just for a little while," she said, "to focus on our new family." But I knew it was permanent. I needed her at home, completely dependent on me, with no social or professional network of her own. A wife like that was easier to manipulate and, more importantly, wouldn't ask unnecessary questions. Once Ava was securely in my control, Sophia and I initiated Phase 2, the systematic draining of Sterling Enterprises. The scheme was sophisticated. We established a chain of offshore shell corporations, all registered under untraceable names. Then, as a major business partner, my company began executing fraudulent contracts with Sterling Enterprises. Contracts for non-existent consulting services and building materials. Sophia, whom I had maneuvered into a position in the finance department, ensured the invoices were paid without a hitch. A river of millions began to flow from Sterling Enterprises into our shell companies, where it was laundered through various accounts before landing in our pockets. The most crucial part of the plan was creating a false paper trail, and every trail had to lead directly to Ava. This was where her absolute trust in me became my most potent tool. "Honey, I have some papers I need you to sign," I'd say in the evening, as she was curled up on the sofa watching a movie. I'd spread the thick documents out on the coffee table. "What is it?" she'd ask, her eyes still on the screen. "Oh, just some boring company stuff. Approving new vendors, that kind of thing. I'm just so swamped, I need your help." She trusted me implicitly. She would take the pen and sign on the dotted lines I'd marked for her. She never read what she was signing. Why would she? Her loving husband would never do anything to harm her. She signed the incorporation documents for the shell companies. She signed the international wire transfer authorizations. She signed agreements, never knowing that each stroke of the pen was bringing her one step closer to a prison cell. Sophia did an expert job of forging Ava's signature on the most sensitive documents. But having Ava's real signature on less critical papers created a perfect smokescreen. It established a pattern of behavior, showing that Ava was accustomed to signing business documents. Once, she paused, squinting at a contract. "This company, Azure Holdings, it sounds unfamiliar. Where are they based?" My heart skipped a beat, but I kept my face calm. "Ah, they're a partner in the Cayman Islands. Better tax structure. Don't worry about the details, sweetheart. It's dreadfully complicated." I leaned over and kissed her forehead. She smiled and kept signing. The trap was set. Tens of millions of dollars had been siphoned off, and the criminal trail, expertly camouflaged, pointed to one person: Ava Sterling Vance, the seemingly innocent housewife who was, on paper, the mastermind of a massive embezzlement scheme. I had everything in place. There was only one thing left to do: destroy her publicly, so no one could ever doubt that I was the real victim. The company's annual charity luncheon was the perfect stage for the final act. The Grand Astoria Hotel was breathtaking on that June afternoon. Sunlight streamed through the massive floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating the opulent ballroom where the city's elite had gathered. It was the annual Sterling Enterprises charity event, and this year, as Alexander's son-in-law and a key business partner, I was the guest speaker. It was the stage I had been waiting for. Ava was by my side, stunning in a seafoam green silk dress I'd bought for her. She looked utterly happy, clutching my arm, smiling as we greeted people. She was proud of me, of the life we had built. Her naivete filled me with a fleeting sense of disgust, which I quickly suppressed. Today was Judgment Day. Sophia was there too, a vision in a provocative scarlet dress. She drifted past us, giving me a subtle wink when Ava wasn't looking. Everything was in position. When it was my turn to speak, I walked to the podium. The room fell silent. I began my speech with tired platitudes about corporate responsibility and giving back. I spoke about the importance of family, of the people who support us. My eyes found Ava. She looked at me, her own eyes shimmering with emotion. "And today," I said, my voice taking on a formal tone, "I want to honor love, the greatest strength we have." A murmur of appreciation went through the hall. Everyone was expecting a grand, romantic gesture. I saw Ava smile, a blush rising on her cheeks as she prepared to stand. "And I would like to invite the woman who inspires me every day, the embodiment of beauty and intelligence, to join me for a special dance." Every head in the room turned to Ava. She started to rise from her chair, her face glowing with happiness. I let the moment hang in the air for an extra second, letting her anticipation build to its peak. And then I turned away. My gaze swept past her, past the confusion that was beginning to dawn on her face, and landed on Sophia's scarlet dress. I stepped down from the stage and walked directly toward her. Time seemed to slow down. I could feel the hundreds of pairs of eyes following me, could hear the whispers spreading like a wave. I saw Ava, frozen halfway out of her chair, one hand still slightly outstretched, suspended in the air. I stopped in front of Sophia and held out my hand. "Sophia, may I have this dance?" Sophia beamed, placing her hand in mine. "Of course, Julian." The orchestra, after a moment's hesitation, began to play a slow waltz. Sophia and I moved to the center of the floor, our bodies swaying in perfect time. The applause that followed was scattered and uncertain. A few people shouted, "Bravo!" trying to break the awkward tension. But most just stared, their eyes darting between us and the woman left standing alone. I glanced over at Ava. Her face was pale, the smile gone, replaced by an expression of raw, uncomprehending hurt. She slowly lowered her hand. A few guests hurried past her, averting their eyes. One woman whispered just loud enough for me to hear, "It must be a joke, the poor thing." I was triumphant. This was it, the public humiliation. This was the image that would be burned into everyone's memory. Julian Vance, the wronged husband, finally finding solace with another. Ava, the supposed betrayer, left in the cold. But as I spun Sophia in my arms, savoring my victory, a tall, imposing figure at the entrance caught my eye. He stood perfectly still, his presence alone seeming to drop the temperature in the room by several degrees. Alexander Sterling. He wasn't looking at me. His ice-cold gaze was fixed on his trembling granddaughter. Then, slowly, his eyes moved to me. There was no anger, no surprise, just a chilling, piercing clarity. In that gaze, I didn't see a business rival. I saw an old wolf watching a foolish lamb that had just walked into its trap. My sense of triumph evaporated, replaced by a cold dread that snaked up my spine. The music seemed to falter. Sophia's arms suddenly felt clammy. I knew. In that single, silent moment, I knew. My game, the chess match I had so carefully orchestrated for 10 years, was over. The luncheon ended in a haze of awkward whispers and polite exits. I tried to maintain a calm facade, but inside a storm was raging. Alexander Sterling's gaze was burned into my mind. After dropping Sophia off, I received a short text from an unknown number. My office. Now. No signature was needed. I drove to Stirling Tower, the heart of the empire I had tried to destroy. The tension was palpable. Alexander's secretary gave me a look of pure contempt, nodding silently toward the large oak doors. His office was on the top floor, a sprawling space with a panoramic view of the city. He stood with his back to me, looking out the window. The room was so quiet, I could hear my own heart hammering against my ribs. "Sit," he said, his voice low and even, without turning around. I took the leather chair opposite his desk, trying to project a confidence I didn't feel. "Mr. Sterling, I assume you want to talk about—" "Be quiet," he cut me off, still not looking at me. The insult in that simple command was worse than a shouted curse. I gritted my teeth and obeyed. After what felt like an eternity, he slowly turned. His face was a mask of neutrality, but his eyes were like shards of glass. He walked to his desk and dropped a thick binder on the polished wood. The dry thud echoed in the silence. "Do you know the difference between an amateur and a professional, Vance?" he asked, his voice cold. "The amateur thinks he's the smartest man in the room. He gets arrogant, and arrogance makes him blind." He opened the binder. It was all there. Bank statements from the Cayman accounts, detailed flowcharts mapping every dollar that moved from Sterling Enterprises to my shell companies, copies of the fraudulent contracts, even transcripts of phone calls between me and Sophia. "Did you think I built this empire on naivety?" he continued, flipping through the pages. "Did you think I wouldn't notice when tens of millions of dollars went missing from my own company?" My throat was dry. This is illegal evidence. You spied on me." A faint, mirthless smile touched his lips. "I didn't spy on you. I protected my assets. When my daughter died, I swore I would never let my family be hurt again. The moment—" "You're lying," I snarled, finally losing my composure. "You ruined him." "I offered him a way out, and he refused it," Alexander replied evenly. "And you, his son, have repeated his mistake. You had the chance at a happy life with a wonderful woman, a woman who truly loved you. But you chose revenge over love. You threw it all away." He pushed another folder across the desk. "This is the court order to freeze all of your assets and those of your companies. And this," he added, sliding over a single sheet of paper, "is a summons from the district attorney's office. They'll be in touch in the morning." My world collapsed. Everything I had built, everything I had plotted for, had turned to dust. I looked at the man across from me, not with hatred, but with a terrifying, hopeless sense of awe. I had gone to war with a titan and been crushed. "Why wait until now?" I asked, my voice a hoarse whisper. "Why let me marry her? Why let it go this far?" Alexander looked me straight in the eye. "Because I wanted to give you enough rope to hang yourself. And more importantly, I wanted Ava to see you for who you really are. Not from my words, but from your own actions. Today's luncheon wasn't your victory, Vance. It was my final piece of evidence." Panic is a wild animal, and it was tearing me apart from the inside. After leaving Alexander's office, I drove aimlessly for hours, my mind racing. Every door had been slammed shut. Frozen assets, irrefutable evidence, and an opponent I had no way of fighting. But I was Richard Vance's son. Quitting was not in my vocabulary. "We have to fight back," I told Sophia during a clandestine meeting in a deserted late-night diner. She looked just as terrified as I felt, her makeup failing to hide the dark circles under her eyes. "Fight back with what, Julian? They have everything. We're finished." "No," I snapped, my voice sounding more confident than I felt. "They have financial evidence, but we have another weapon. public opinion. We're going to turn this into a story of a ruthless corporate giant crushing a young entrepreneur. We're going to make Ava the villain. Sophia stared at me like I was insane. How? She's the victim. Nobody knows that, I countered, a desperate plan beginning to form. We're going to tell a different story, a better one. The story of an ambitious orphan, a gold digger who seduced me for my money. When she found out she was a sterling, she turned on me, conspired with her grandfather to steal everything I had and frame me. The plan was dirty and desperate, but it was all I had. I used the last of my unfrozen cash to hire a crisis PR firm. We launched an all-out media blitz. The next day, an exclusive article appeared in a popular tabloid under the headline, "Cinderella or Con Artist? The Truth Behind the Secret Sterling Heiress." The article, quoting sources close to the couple that I invented, painted a completely different picture of Ava. It implied she had known about her identity all along and had targeted me as a stepping stone. A photo from the luncheon of me dancing with Sophia was captioned, "Julian Vance finds solace after discovering the devastating truth about his wife." But that was just the opening salvo. The main attack was a televised interview with Sophia. Sitting in a modestly decorated room, wearing a simple sweater, she wept for the cameras. "I saw it all," she sobbed. "I saw how she manipulated Julian. He loved her with all his heart, gave her everything. But for her, it was never enough. The moment she knew she was a sterling, the greed took over. She destroyed our family. Julian and we were just friends, but she tried to ruin my reputation too." She played the part of the tragic victim perfectly. The public began to bite. Social media forums exploded. Sympathy for me grew. "Can't believe it! A total gold digger! Poor guy, got played by both the grandfather and the granddaughter." I thought I could turn the tide. I thought the public pressure would make the DA's office hesitate, that it would weaken Alexander's resolve. In a final, foolish act of arrogance, I called Ava. "Surprised, Ava?" I said when she answered, my voice dripping with triumph. "This is just the beginning, sweetheart. I have friends in the media, on the police force. You think you can just throw me away?" There was a long silence on the other end of the line. I expected tears, shouting, begging me to stop. Her actual response sent a chill down my spine. "You're a criminal, Julian," she said, her voice devoid of any tremor, filled only with cold contempt. "And you are going to pay for what you've done. Your disgusting games won't save you. They only show the world exactly what kind of man you are." She hung up. And she was right. My campaign had created a media storm, but it was a firestorm that burned out as quickly as it started, especially as irrefutable facts began to emerge. Instead of weakening their case, my actions only hardened the resolve of the Sterling family and the prosecutors. They didn't just want justice anymore. Now they wanted to vindicate Ava. I had thrown my last match, and all it did was make the inferno that was about to consume me burn even brighter. The courtroom was packed. Reporters, bloggers, and the morbidly curious crammed into the benches to see the finale of the drama that had dominated the headlines for 2 months. My case had become a symbol, a high society play of love, betrayal, and money. I sat at the defendant's table in my last good suit, trying to look composed. But 2 months in jail awaiting trial had taken their toll. The polished veneer was gone, replaced by a rough beard and a weary exhaustion. The cold calculation was still in my eyes, but now it was coated with a thin layer of desperation. Sophia sat next to me, visibly trembling, darting her eyes around the room like a trapped animal. Then Ava entered. She took a seat in the front row next to Alexander. The entire room turned to look at her. Through the storm of the past 2 months, She hadn't withered. On the contrary, she seemed stronger than ever. She wore a simple but powerful navy blue suit. Her gaze was no longer that of a wide-eyed doe. It was the steady, unwavering gaze of a queen. She didn't look at me. It was as if I no longer existed. The trial began. My high-priced lawyer did his best, weaving a narrative of a corporate conspiracy. He argued that I was the victim of Alexander Sterling, who wanted to eliminate a young rival and used his newfound granddaughter to frame me. "My client was set up," he boomed. "All this so-called evidence was fabricated. Mr. Sterling used his influence to destroy a man who knew too much about his own past." I listened, knowing it was futile. The evidence was a mountain. Financial experts traced every dollar. Handwriting experts confirmed the forgeries. But the final blow didn't come from an expert witness. It came when Ava was called to the stand. She walked with a quiet dignity, placed her hand on the Bible, and swore to tell the truth. Her voice was clear and steady. The prosecutor started with simple questions: how she met me, what our marriage was like. She answered calmly, factually. "Were you aware of your husband's financial operations?" "No," she replied. "He told me it was boring work and I wouldn't be interested." "Did you ever sign any contracts for Sterling Enterprises?" "Never." "Then how do you explain your signature on these documents?" the prosecutor asked, gesturing to the scans on the courtroom monitors. Ava looked at the screen. "Those are forgeries, as the experts have confirmed. Furthermore, several of those documents are dated on days when I was physically out of the city. On March 15th, for instance, I was at the cemetery, visiting my foster mother's grave. There is a witness to that." It was my lawyer's turn to cross-examine. He approached the stand, attempting to use his intimidating presence. "Mrs. Vance," he began, "you claim you knew nothing of your husband's activities, yet you lived on his income. You wore designer clothes, drove an expensive car. Weren't you surprised that a single executive could afford such a lavish lifestyle?" Ava met his gaze without flinching. "My husband received a high salary and significant bonuses. I saw nothing suspicious in our lifestyle." "And when you discovered you were Mr. Sterling's granddaughter, didn't that seem like a very convenient coincidence?" "I don't understand the question." "I'm asking," my lawyer pressed, raising his voice, "if this entire story isn't a performance. Did you and your grandfather decide to get rid of an inconvenient executive and invent this beautiful legend of a poor orphan and a villainous husband?" Ava paused. The courtroom held its breath. I knew this was the critical moment. "I grew up in foster care," she said, her voice quiet but firm, carrying to every corner of the room. "I was adopted by hard-working people who died when I was 20. I worked my way through school and built my own career. When I married Julian, I had no idea who my biological grandfather was. And I certainly didn't plan for my husband to publicly humiliate me at a gala, only to later discover he was a thief who was trying to frame me for his crimes." A dead silence fell over the room. Her words weren't angry. They were simple, devastating truth. They were more powerful than any accusation. "I have no further questions," my lawyer mumbled, retreating to his chair. In that moment, I knew I had lost. I wasn't defeated by financial evidence or expert testimony. I was defeated by the very woman I had tried to destroy. I had tried to cast her as a weak, pathetic victim, but my actions had inadvertently forged her into a warrior. The woman on that stand was not the Ava I had married. She was the Ava I had forced her to become, a queen born from the fire of my betrayal. Waiting for the jury's verdict was the longest hour of my life. When they filed back into the courtroom, their faces were grim and unreadable. But I could feel the answer in the heavy air. "On the charge of grand larceny, We, the jury, find the defendant, Julian Vance, guilty. The word guilty was repeated for every charge: embezzlement, fraud, forgery. I heard Sophia let out a choked sob beside me. As for me, I felt nothing but a cold, hollowing emptiness. The game was truly over. The judge delivered the sentence shortly after. Julian Vance is hereby sentenced to 8 years in state prison. Sophia Miller is sentenced to 4 years. As the bailiffs came to handcuff me, something inside me snapped. I started shouting incoherently, cursing the system, cursing the Sternings. It was the last, pathetic roar of a cornered animal. As they dragged me from the courtroom, I saw Ava one last time. Alexander had his arm around her. She wasn't looking at me with triumph or hatred. In her eyes, I saw a profound sadness for what could have been. And then, a quiet release. Now, in the silence of my cell, I have all the time in the world to reflect. Scraps of news from the outside world sometimes reach me. I hear Ava has taken a senior position at Sterling Enterprises. At first, people were skeptical, assuming nepotism. But she proved them all wrong. She turned around a failing division, bringing in fresh ideas and a compassionate leadership style. She didn't just reclaim her family, she found herself, found a strength she never knew she possessed. And I? The man who tried to destroy her is the architect of her greatness. My betrayal shattered the gilded cage I had built for her, forcing her to spread her own wings. There is a bitter irony in that. I set out to destroy the Sterling legacy, and in the end, I created its most worthy heir. My greatest torment is not these years in prison. Prison is merely the consequence of my actions. The real torture is the question that will haunt me for the rest of my days. What if? What if I had rejected my father's poisonous legacy? What if, when I first met Ava, I had seen a woman instead of a tool? An intelligent, talented woman with a good heart. What if I had allowed myself to truly love her, to build a life based on truth instead of lies? I could have had it all. A wife who adored me, a family, a career built on my own merits instead of on deceit. I could have been a good man. But I chose my father's path. I chose hatred over love. And now I have nothing, except the ghosts of my crimes and the man I could have been. I am exactly where I belong, in a prison built not just of concrete and steel, but of my own choices. And outside these walls, Ava is living the life she deserves, a life of freedom, strength, and purpose. And perhaps that is the ultimate justice. My story is a bitter, cautionary tale about the destructive power of hatred. Hatred is a prison we build for ourselves, brick by brick, and then lock ourselves inside. It's a poison that doesn't just corrupt our own souls. It seeps out, destroying everything and everyone we touch. I inherited a feud from my father, and instead of breaking the cycle, I became another link in the chain, perpetuating the pain. I thought revenge would bring me victory and release, but in the end, it left me with nothing but emptiness and regret. The most profound value I have come to understand, far too late, is the power of choice. Every day we stand at a crossroads, between love and hate, creation and destruction, truth and deceit. The legacies of our past can be heavy, and the wounds can be deep, but they do not have to define our future. The choices we make in the present are what shape who we become. I had the chance to choose love, and I chose revenge. That was my greatest crime, and it is my true life sentence. Thank you for listening to my story. I hope it has offered you some perspective. I'm truly interested to hear your thoughts.